and
Okay.
and I want you to do the same thing today.
I
Uh,
will try.
okay, that's how you learn, by making statements. That's how the Gemara
Okay.
works. You make a statement, then you ask a question, and then you answer the question. So what I was trying to tell you last time is when you study Kohelet or even Mishlei, they really don't make a statement that is meant to be in every sense of the word. Like when we talked about money answers everything, that was not meant to be an end-all statement. That would be, there's nothing more to ask or to challenge. It was not that at all. It happened to deal with everything is relative in the writings of King Solomon. Okay, and that's true in Judaism. For instance, one of the things we read in number 18. Do you remember that? Can you see the verse? Um, would anybody like to read it for me? Number 18.
Where is 18?
Do you see that? It's
There's,
on page.
there's
It's not towards the
slothfulness.
top of the page.
See,
Do I lose it?
I'll read it.
I
Who's going to
have
volunteer
to.
to read it? Who was born in America? Okay, Jeffrey, go ahead. Take it away.
Put it in there.
Through slothfulness, the ceiling sags, and through idleness of the hands, the house leaks.
Okay, that's King Solomon telling us that laziness is a very bad situation.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, he's saying when people are lazy, their house can fall apart, the ceiling can sag, the a leak comes through the roof, and that could be miserable, especially if it's dripping on your head. And yet, when people are lazy, that's what happens. And he says, stay away from laziness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Um, Somebody make a comment. Okay, laziness is very bad. Okay, that's what he's trying to say. In the next sentence, he says, a feast is made for laughter, and wine gladdens life. Now, what he's saying over here is compared to laziness. Okay, slothfulness. He said it's much better for a person to be interested in making parties, making feasts, celebrating with wine, cheering everyone up. That's a much better situation than the person who is lazy. Now, later on, he's going to tell us that a person shouldn't think too much about parties. That's not what it's all about. And yet here he's saying that feasting and laughter and wine is much better than laziness. And the reason is, if you want to have parties and serve wine, you cannot be lazy. You have to really exert yourself so that the party can take place. But if you're lazy, there will not be any party. Well, let's think about our favorite holiday coming up. That could be, I'm thinking of Purim. Am I close? If Purim is coming up, then there's a mitzvah called the Seudat Purim, right? To have a nice meal and to celebrate and to maybe to serve wine or alcohol as part of the Purim feast. And if a person is lazy, meaning they didn't bother to go to work that week and they didn't have any money, are they going to make a Purim feast? Highly doubtful. So it's better for a person to be ambitious. And even though with his ambitiousness, he's going to make parties and hopefully he'll make a Purim party, that would be very good, because a lazy person will not ever get to make the party. And because he isn't making a party, he probably won't go to a party, so he won't get to do the mitzvah of Purim. So that's what I mean when I say King Solomon is comparing one a tendency to another. Okay, so laziness is really bad. And if you think about it, people who are too lazy to get up in the morning don't get to shul, or they don't get to daven. They don't get to do a lot of things because it takes too much energy. Okay, and King Solomon in another place in Proverbs, he makes the statement that when a person is lazy, they aren't even willing to reach for the food on the table. It takes too much energy. Can you imagine that kind of laziness? You're just like completely zonked out. And so he says the worst thing if we compare various values, is laziness. Lazy people don't get to do many mitzvot. But if they're not lazy, at least they can make parties, and a Purim party is a good party, and maybe a Shabbos meals are good. And then he answers, but money answers everything, meaning that if you make money, you can do mitzvos with the money. Okay. The truth is, money doesn't answer everything. We all agree to that. But money does allow us to do mitzvos, to do good deeds. And he's not saying that we should rob the bank. He's just saying that with money we can achieve many good deeds. And in fact, in another place, he will tell us that if you have money, you can afford to get a good education. Okay. Now, do you remember the story with Hillel, who used to pay money to get into the yeshiva to study? You all remember that story somewhat? Debbie, have you ever heard of that story when he couldn't be admitted? So what happened? I'll remind you if I think
what happened is he went up on the roof in a cold, rainy night and listened through the hole in the roof.
Very good. Okay. So the point is that he was trying to support himself, right? He was working hard, and when he arrived in Israel to support himself, he was a wood chopper, and he would sell the wood, and half of the money he got from the wood would go to pay the janitor to get into the yeshiva, and the other half would be used to support his family, for food. So that famous Friday in Jerusalem, when the snow came down, he did not have any money to be admitted into the yeshiva. So, as you said, Jack, he climbed up on top of the roof, and he was so intent on what they were saying inside that he didn't realize it was snowing. And he was covered in snow, and he passed out. And the next morning, the two rabbis, Shmaya and Avtalion, realized the room was very dark, and they saw the outline of a person on the skylight. So they went up and they brought him down, and they wanted to save his life. So they lit a fire on Shabbos, which would be okay because he needed to be brought back. And they said, this man is so dedicated to Torah, we will not ever have him pay for admittance into the yeshiva again. But as you can see, normally, if you wanted to study in the yeshiva, you had to pay the janitor or the custodian to let you in, because he was warming up the building for you. He made the books available. And that's why money answers not everything, but many things it does answer. So Hillel's education was based upon being able to pay the janitor to get in. In the Hebrew, money answers everything is really not the Hebrew, what the Hebrew says. Over there in Hebrew, it says, Kesef ya'aneh et ha-kol. Ha-kol means the all, meaning it answers the people who like to be answered with money. All right, there's always somebody out there, probably your favorite politician, who will see the light differently if you can make some donations in his direction. Okay, I think that's called politics, and you caught the joke. Okay,
Sorry.
and so for some people, if you have money, you get what you want. If you don't have money, then you may be in trouble. But in general, money is a good thing to do mitzvos, right? I was talking the other day to somebody about wearing tefillin, the black boxes.
Yeah.
And I told a story, which I don't think I've shared with you. I was at a very famous synagogue where we had a lot of children who were coming up for bar mitzvah age. And so I made a request from all the parents and grandparents if they would donate any tefillin that were not being used, so the youngsters could practice wearing tefillin before they were their bar mitzvah. Okay, it would sound like a brilliant idea. So I called in a scribe, a sofer, to check the tefillin. There were 13 pair, and to we would save the ones that were good and use them with the children. So the scribe checked over all the tefillin, and he came back with the results. He said, of the 13 pair of tefillin that he examined, 12 of them were never kosher to begin with. They were never made properly. They were made inexpensively. And people who were getting a good deal on their tefillin were actually getting non-kosher tefillin. So they never did the mitzvah of tefillin. And the blessings they made over the tefillin were taking God's name in vain. There was only one pair of tefillin that was kosher. It's called b'diavad, or after the fact. So my point of telling you this story is to say to you that if you do have money, it does answer certain problems. If you have enough money, you can buy tefillin that are kosher. Okay, whereas people who were trying to save $1 here and there were getting the non-kosher tefillin, and their Judaism suffered because they really didn't have the right kind.
You're being very generous.
Oh, thank you.
By 12, 1 to 12, it wasn't the person who bought the tefillin. It was the person who made the tefillin.
Okay.
See, who had the problem.
Right.
See, because
right.
The tefillin would be fine if he had done his job properly.
Right.
So the one that got the advantage of shoddy work and shoddy thinking is not the purchaser. It's the person that put it on the market to begin with.
Very well said. However, the person who was doing that was selling the tefillin at a much cheaper price than the people who were making legitimate tefillin. Okay, and because of that, people not knowing that some tefillin are kosher and some would not be, they were buying the cheaper ones, thinking if it's kosher, why do I have to spend more money? And in the end, they really never had kosher tefillin to begin with. And that was the sad thing. So I was speaking to a gentleman the other day here at our synagogue, and it turns out that if you want kosher tefillin, you really cannot get any wholesale deals, because if it's kosher, it's made in a very special way, and it takes time and energy. By the way, the non-kosher tefillin, you may not believe this, there are little passages inside the tefillin, right? Little inserts from the Torah. Many of the tefillin that were not kosher had little comic book wrappings inside the tefillin. Can you believe that? That, like, from Bazooka Gum? Do you remember
That's
those?
fraud.
That is,
Oh my
it's so
God.
shocking. In other words, they didn't care. They were out to make money. They didn't care that they were fooling anyone. They were putting in little pieces of paper that were not anywhere, kosher, but they didn't care. And the people who bought it may not have known the difference. And so the point is that money can make a difference. Okay. And we often say, if you want to do the mitzvah right, don't try and save money on a mitzvah, because you really may not get the mitzvah at all if you're saving money. Unfortunately, there are unethical people in the religion business who will make not only tefillin, but what about the mezuzahs? Are you familiar with the mezuzah stories? Where people would make, a mezuzah to be kosher, like the tefillin, has to be written by hand. Okay, that's just like a Torah also has to be written by hand to be kosher. Now, many people, to make a lot of extra money, would make copies of the little parsha. Okay, they would make copies, and then these were not kosher. You really have to have it written by hand, but they were getting it, making it much cheaper to do it that way. They were being very dishonest and tricking people, and that's why people were buying mezuzahs very cheaply and very proud. They got beautiful mezuzahs, and they were judging the mezuzah by the outward container, right? If that looked pretty, then the inside was very good too. But it wasn't true. The inside, in most cases, was illegitimate. It was not done properly. Okay, so King Solomon really knew something when he said, "Money answers all things," meaning if you want to do something right, you really need to spend the money. And again, people often should ask their rabbi for help when it comes to buying, mezuzah or tefillin or even prayer books. Very often there are prayer books that are very good where they give you explanations, and others that leave you in the dark. Any observations? Any questions?
Yes, there's one other thing I would say.
Go ahead.
On the part of the person that's
Uh-huh.
selling it, and he knows probably that it's not kosher.
Right.
So it says in the Torah, "Lifnei iver lo sitei maksho." So
Right.
he's going against that. So he must know something if it's getting cheaper. So he is committing a terrific sin.
Right.
There's
Yes.
a lot on him that's
Right.
not
That's
right.
terrible. Now you
So-
maybe. Thank you, Debbie. You're absolutely right. Is it possible people could do that with kosher meat? That they might
Possibly.
sell kosher meat that may not be kosher?
Yes, I mean, I've heard of all kinds of stories. Well, all kinds of stories,
Right.
really. So, I
Right.
mean, if a butcher doesn't want to become part of a VAD, you should question that. Because when
Right.
you're a part of a VAD, you have to go by what the VAD wants. But
Right.
if you go to somebody, that only has like one rabbi in there, you can bribe him a few dollars and then he'll tell you whatever you want to know.
Right.
And then, but the buyer will never know. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that these things are coming up all the time in the religious communities,
Right.
and I think it's terrible. I don't know what people can do about it, but.
Okay, so now I think we understand King Solomon in a different way. When he says money answers everything, he
Yes.
means for the people who want to cheat you, they're willing to sell their soul, right? They'll sell you non-kosher chicken or meat or tefillin or mezuzahs.
Right.
Because for them, the only thing they really care about is making the money.
Right.
Now, would you be shocked if I told you that even in the holy city of Lakewood, they have found people selling non-kosher meat and chicken? Would you believe that's possible?
I mean, in one way I believe it because people want to make a buck, and
Right.
another way,
Right.
the idea that religious people are doing this is sad and makes me feel very sad. So, I mean, I believe it, but I
Right.
feel that it's so unethical
Right.
that people are still doing this in this day and age and
That-
getting away with it.
Right. And it's been going on for a very, very long time. There have always been people, we call them charlatans, I believe, that they put money above everything else. And as such, they sell their soul and they commit many, many sins. But for them, you see, when King Solomon says money answers everything, he may be referring to the people who are crooks. They're willing to do anything to make extra money, even if it's going to be dishonest and it'll be non-kosher, the things they're selling. And this is really a big problem. Jack, did you want to add something to that?
Well, I have trouble. If I have a set of tefillin, does that mean I have to go from the place where I bought it to some other sofer to have it inspected?
Not necessarily. If you know who you're dealing with and they're reputable and they're not selling the tefillin for $2.98,
Right.
then you're fine.
Well, we don't have a sofer anywhere close to the holy city of Pottstown.
Okay. What about the holy city of Reading? They must have a sofer there. I guess not. But you're right. You need somebody who can guide you. Okay. What I'm trying to say is when you want to buy something, whether it's a mezuzah or a tefillin or a talis, and it's very inexpensive, something isn't right. So usually you need an expert to guide you and tell you where you should buy your tefillin. Okay. And as I said, the problem will be that when it's a real cheap or inexpensive purchase, you're not doing yourself a favor. You're really hurting yourself. Okay, so so here's what happens after I heard the scribe tell me only one of the tefillin was kosher. After the fact, called b'diavad in Aramaic, I decided that I better provide tefillin for people who come to shul every day, because many of our visitors were coming from out of town, and it wasn't unusual for them to forget to take their tefillin. So I wanted to have tefillin available for our visitors. And what I did is I asked our visitors if they would be so kind as to make some donations so I could go to Boston and buy strictly kosher tefillin. And I was very happy. It was around 1996, and people gave me $1,300. This wasn't coming from the board of the synagogue. I'm afraid some of the people on the board weren't wearing tefillin at all, so they didn't care about it. But my visitors did want people to have tefillin. So I was given $1,300, and I bought 2 pairs of tefillin, and they were used all the time. Visitors came in and said, "We forgot our tefillin. Do you have anything?" And my biggest responsibility was when people would borrow the tefillin to be sure they didn't go home with those tefillin, because that would be very unfortunate, because I wanted the tefillin to be available to anyone who came to the shul to use them. And it worked out that people were very appreciative, and they always returned the tefillin. And in the end, the point is, anything that's inexpensive probably isn't what you want to have. Okay. Now, let's take a look at number 20. Okay. Okay, Jack, read that for me, please, in your best English.
Even in your thoughts, do not curse a king, and in your bedchamber, do not curse the rich. For the bird of the skies may carry the sound, and some winged creature may betray the matter.
Okay, I do remember saying this to you when Father Jacob was ready to take Rachel and Leah and the children back to Israel. He knew that his father-in-law was very dangerous, named Laban. And so he wanted to get he had a dream where an angel told him it's time to go back to Israel. So he wanted to get the blessing of Rachel and Leah. So it says in Genesis that he asked them to meet him outside. He did not want to have this discussion indoors, because there's always somebody listening nearby. You know, there are people who just enjoy knowing your personal life. So Jacob takes the family outside where they can see that if anyone was anywhere near, and then he asks them, "Is it okay? Are you willing to go to Israel now?" And they said, "Absolutely." They realized their father had been cheating them the whole time, and that the point over there is, try to if you have anything very private to say, look around. Try not to even say it indoors, because there's always a bird, so to speak, by the window who's listening in. There are people who love to do that, and they're listening for very personal or private information, and that you don't want that to happen. So, and of course, this happens with one of our great rabbis named Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who one day was having a discussion outdoors with 2 of his colleagues, and they were talking about what Rome had done for Jerusalem. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who, by the way, is the father of the Kabbalah, the author of the Zohar, he had terrible things to say about the Romans. He said whatever they've done was to steal the money. They charged for everything. They built a bridge. We had to pay taxes for it. They introduced the brothels. They were trying in every way to ruin the decency of the Jewish people. So if somebody was walking by and heard him and thought, "Boy, that's interesting," they thought it would be a good idea to share his idea with other people. And unfortunately, once somebody decides to share an idea that somebody else will hear that idea. Eventually, the Romans heard that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had criticized the government, and they decided that it was time to take his life. So you know the rest of the story. When he found out they were looking for him, he took his son, and they hid in a cave for 13 years. Is that familiar to anybody? Anybody hear the story?
Yes.
Okay. So the point was that he said something where somebody repeated what he said, not because they were, yentas or talebearers, whatever the word is. They just thought it's interesting to hear what he had to say. But when you repeat something and somebody else repeats it, it eventually goes to the wrong party, and that put him in great danger. They wanted to execute him for having any complaints against the government. Now I ask you, is anything like that happening these days in America, where if you have any complaint, you are an enemy of the country? Has anything like that going on? No? I'm glad it's not going on. But right now, anybody who was, who was in the Republican Party is under suspicion, it seems to me, and that's just too bad. Jack, do you have any ideas on this topic?
Yeah, the idea that I have on this, and verse 20, you're responsible for what you do, but you're also responsible for what you think.
Okay.
And if you have bad thoughts, even in the privacy of your bedroom, you're going to be, you can always be in trouble. It'd be better off to not have those thoughts. And
well, the thoughts, it's okay to have thoughts, but it's when you express those thoughts that people might hold it against you. Okay, we all have thoughts. And there's nothing wrong with thinking this or that, but the Torah holds us responsible for what we say, not what we think, but what we say. And right now, it seems a lot of people are losing their jobs because they voted for a particular political party, and they're paying the penalty for it. So I think that's unfortunate. We certainly want a fair country, a democracy, but what's happened lately is very unusual. Okay, anyway, when you have a secret, be careful of how you share that secret, because when the word gets out, it can cause a lot of trouble, because people may hear what you have to say, and you don't want them to know what you had to say, because they won't like what you have to say. Okay, go ahead.
That gives the maxim: what I never said never hurt me.
Right, very good. Right. But when it comes to thinking, you can think whatever you want. There's no, in Judaism, if you can have any thoughts you like, if you don't act out on your thoughts, right? Like, I want to steal your yarmulke, Jack. Okay, as long as I want to do it, but I don't do it, I have not committed a sin. You follow my drift?
Yeah, but if you want my yarmulke and you don't want to pay for it, that tells me something about you.
On the other hand, if you have a yarmulke that I want to steal, it tells me something about you, that
right,
you're all your money in your yarmulke.
right.
Okay, everyone, you follow what's going on? What we're saying is, because you want to do something doesn't mean it's wrong or forbidden, right? On Yom Kippur, I'm sure many people have wonderful thoughts about, how nice it would be to have an ice cream cone or whatever. That's not a sin, okay? It's only human nature to, when you're hungry, to think about food. The difference is between what you think and what you do. Okay, just wanted to share that with you. Let's get to chapter 11 of Kohelet. Okay, and here, Debbie, how's your English? Could you read the first verse? Number 1, send your bread.
Send your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it. Distribute portions
Okay,
to
stop
sever.
there. Okay, we'll get to that. Number.
Okay, okay, so I'll just stop there.
Okay, I thank you, Debbie. So the point is,
Okay.
what do people normally do with bread?
Well, to eat it. Well, the only thing where bread goes on the water is when you go for tashlich. That's what
Okay,
reminds me of.
okay.
Send your bread upon the waters.
Okay, very good, Debbie. You're right. Right. So what Shlomo HaMelech is saying is that the mitzvah of feeding the hungry, or actually there's a mitzvah even feeding the wealthy. Did you know that? If you invite wealthy people to your home and you feed them, that's a mitzvah. There's another mitzvah to feed people who are poor. But over here, King Solomon is saying, when you put your bread upon the water, meaning that you take care of somebody who needs food, after many days you will find it, meaning that your mitzvah will come back to you. Somebody will do you a favor in return for what you just did.
Okay.
Okay, you follow what I'm saying? In other words, your thoughtfulness is going to make a difference. And someday when you need a favor, when you're in trouble or you have no food in your house or whatever, somebody will come and return that bread that you gave away. Okay, so it could be we're talking about charity. There's a beautiful story in the Talmud about during the time of the Roman Empire, when there was a lot of suffering going on. One of our great rabbis went down to the ocean or to the Mediterranean, maybe to fish or whatever, and he found a Roman soldier, floating in the water. So he did what most people would not expect. He decided to save this man and to bring him back to life and to feed him until he was able to get back on his feet. So people, resented the rabbi because they said, you should have let him die in the water. He's our enemy. Why did you feed him? Why did you nurse him back to health? Well, it turns out a number of years later, when the Jewish people were in a lot of trouble with the Roman Empire, this rabbi went to the general to ask for for Rachmanis, that the Romans were asking too much of the Jewish people. And it turns out that the man he went to turned out to be the man whose life he saved. And this man was appreciative of what the rabbi did, and he canceled the orders for the suffering of the Jewish people. So the point is that when you do a good deed for someone, it may not be the same day, but at some point you will find that somebody will do you a favor as well. That's the point. For instance, I was speaking recently. I was giving a Dvar Torah in the shul, and I mentioned the fact that Moses, and Jethro were destined to become related. Okay, do you know who Jethro is? Moses' father-in-law. Moses married his daughter. So what did they shared a common destiny? And according to the Talmud, before Pharaoh issued his decree of persecution of the Jews and slavery, he asked his advisors if this was a good idea. One of his advisors was named Jethro or Yitro. Yitro said, no, it is very immoral to make people suffer, to enslave or to make them suffer. You should not do that. Leave them alone. If they're not creating a problem, leave them alone. And there was another advisor who said, no, if you don't like the situation, you may kill the Jews. You'll be better off. So because Jethro was in favor of not persecuting the Jews, he was forced to run for his life. He left Egypt and he went to a place called Midian, another country. And that's where he meets up with Moses. Now, Moses also, remember, was trying to help the Jewish people. And he got into trouble when two people reported him to the king of Egypt. Their names were Datan and Aviram. Okay, so what this is all about is these two people tried to save the Jews. One was Yitro, and he was punished for it. He had to run for his life. And Moshe also tried to save the Jewish people, and he too was punished. And they both had to leave. And it would be many years later that God would reward both of them, that they would both be partners in saving the Jewish people. So this is what we mean in send your bread upon the waters, meaning when Moses and Jethro tried to save the Jewish people, God would reward them that in the end they would save the Jewish people, not in the first attempt, but in a later attempt. And both of them are mentioned together. And Jethro converts to Judaism, and he gives advice to Moses about how to lead the people. And Moses accepts that advice. It's in the section called Yitro. And some of you may remember that Yitro says to Moshe, it isn't right for you to judge the people all by yourself. Even if God gives you the knowledge of the Torah, you need people to help you. And Moshe asks God if he can do it. And God says yes. And Moshe appoints leaders over tens and hundreds and thousands. And this way, everybody is given the help they need. They don't have to wait all day long to get the answer to their questions. So the point is, both men tried to save the Jewish people. They failed originally, and then later on they succeeded. And that's what King Solomon means when send your bread upon the waters. Much later, after, you will find that it really worked. What you tried to do really will be achieved. Okay, and that's one of the interpretations of doing the right thing, and in the end, you will see very good results. Not the same day, but eventually. Anybody have an observation about this? Anybody have a point to make about this from history? Okay, well, I'm thinking of a great man who decided the Jewish people needed a homeland of their own. And the year was 1895. His name was Theodor Herzl.
Herzl.
Okay, Herzl was at a he was a let's see, he was a journalist, and he went to cover a trial in Paris of a Jewish man who was accused of disloyalty to the French people. Okay, and
Dreyfus.
Dreyfus was is his name, and Herzl heard the people yelling, "Kill the Jew!" You know that the anti-Semitism was outrageous. So Herzl decided maybe the Jewish people need a homeland of their own where they won't be in so much danger. So he decides to make this his life's ambition, to find a way of getting the Jewish people to Eretz Yisrael. And you know what? At that time, it wasn't working, right? The world wasn't ready to accept it. One of the famous popes, I think it was Leo X, said to Herzl, you want to have a Jewish homeland, it can never be because you rejected our religion. So you will now be wandering the earth forever and ever as a punishment. Well, was the Pope right or wrong? Are we still wandering the earth, or do we have a homeland? Anyone know the answer? No one knows? Okay, the answer is we do have a homeland.
Homeland, yes.
All right, I'm asking hard questions, right? Okay. So the point is that Herzl really, although he could see that it wasn't really working, he said he was convinced that within 50 years there would be a Jewish Medina. And you know what? It was 50 years later that actually Israel became a nation in 1948. So the point is that sometimes you work on a project, even if it doesn't work out immediately, eventually it will. And that was what he meant by send your bread upon the waters. You know, do your best and be prepared that at a later point, good things will happen. Well, I want to thank all of you for paying attention, laughing at my jokes, and sharing your knowledge. And I hope you'll join me next week. And if you have any questions between now and next week, please jot them down. I'd like to hear your questions. Maybe I can answer them. Okay. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Happy Super Bowl.
How
Okay.
about a good other? Because that we're gonna have.
Okay. Other is good.
Rosh Chodesh.
Right now, and of course with with Valentine's Day coming up, it's not surprising that people say, "I adore you." And somebody heard it was a joke.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. All right, everybody. Happy Adar. Okay. And